Okay, so the title of this course is Improving Your Business with UX Design. All right. Therefore, a very important thing that we'll be going through today is what exactly is design, or what do we mean when we say the word design in UX design, and of course, what is UX? What is user experience? And then once you know these few things, then you will understand what you're actually designing for and whether or not that's something that's going to be really useful for your business, right? This is me, all right. But let me give you a more in-depth introduction of who I am, so that you know that or at least you know who is speaking, why he's talking this way, and hopefully what you can get out of this. All right. So this is me. Very brief history. All right. I graduated with a PhD in computer engineering in 2013. And then since then, I've held different portfolios in NUS. I was assistant professor for interactive media design. And then now I'm senior lecturer for metaverse development and experiential learning at UX design. And at the same time, I'm also a co-principal investigator at the SIA NUS Corporate Aviation Lab. Okay. So a little bit of stuff that I've done in a while, right, is that I create as I teach. So what happens is that in NUS, we have a lot of opportunities to create a lot of really fun material. So things that I create a lot of fun, interesting material as I teach certain courses that, and you will see the courses that I'll be teaching later on, all right? And at the same time, I teach as I create, right? So the thing is that as I create, I teach, and then I get students to try out the stuff that I tried, and then they give me opinions about what works, what doesn't work, and I learn from that as well, okay? So actually, I need to check. Can all of you see my slides? You all see what's going on? My slides? Yes, no? Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, great. So you can see my slides. Great. Okay. So, and then my style of teaching and learning and creating is that it's a virtual cycle. So each time I create stuff, we try them out, people talk about them, and then we go back and we iteratively improve it, right? So in the same way, my design processes are all about iteration, okay? And anybody here who has done things like agile development or methodology would know this idea of iteration, right? And we practice it a lot in my courses, right? We won't really talk about that so much in this particular webinar, but if you do come and take my courses, we will be using it a lot. So as long as you already know, or you use a lot of iteration, you should be able to be fine, right? And if you don't, well, you're learning something new anyway. So the stuff that I've done in the past 10 years, let me just briefly introduce to you what I've been done in the past 10 years. So in 2009, many of you would hopefully you were born by then, okay? 2009, it's probably been, about 13 years, 14 years. You do know that phones didn't have all the sensors that we currently have in our phones, right? It didn't have GPS, it didn't have your sensors, your gyroscopes, and whatever. Yeah, so it was very difficult to do really cool stuff with phones at that time. But we basically built a lot of these capabilities into existing phones, and we created the first augmented reality projection system. Okay, and then we went on to then use things like sensors to try and detect behavior within buildings, right? And because of that, in 2015, we created this thing called the reflection system that uses the sensors just in your mobile devices, like your mobile phones, to be able to recreate movement and use that movement for experimental purposes, right? So, for example, if you were in a building or you were in a classroom, without any intrusive cameras or whatever, we could still be able to do sensing just based off the sensors in your phone, for example, anything that you were carrying, okay? So this is what we call enabling technology infrastructure, because it's something that enables certain things to happen, right? At the same time, we then put it to good use, right? So in 2014, we had a project that would detect things like falls or specific incorrect movements, especially for the elderly, and then we'll be able to then detect if they needed help and alert the authorities as required, right? So this was featured in 2014 on the news. And then I do a lot of work in metaverse as well. In fact, my primary job scope is in the metaverse, all right? In 2012, 2014, I invented a way where you could tell people to look around in their environment without actually telling them, right? So it's something that their eyes will not be able to see it, but your brain will be able to see it. Okay, so and again, it was a long time ago. VR wasn't a thing yet, so we had to hack together a lot of stuff ourselves. And the idea was that we invented this thing called a subtle cue, whereby if you look at a situation where there is no cue and a situation where there is a cue, all right, a subtle cue is a part in the environment that has been altered slightly, so that people will be drawn towards it, even though they don't know why, they're being drawn towards it, right? So it's a way of attention management in augmented and virtual reality. And of course, we did experiments about that. And if you're interested, we can talk about it, right? But we're not here to talk about that. What we are interested to talk about is how does this factor into actual users and people experiencing stuff, all right? So similar technology was deployed in, for example, the Art Science Museum or in our Singapore Science Center. So if you have gone to these places in between these times, you would have seen stuff like this. Yeah, they all created myself or my team. And then we started putting in a lot of interactive technology to try and understand users a little bit better, to understand what they liked, what they didn't like, and why, right? We also worked with companies to then see how a lot of this technology actually influences consumer behavior. Yeah. And then after we started going on to more advanced interaction types, like, for example, using your hand gestures, natural gestures, we're able to control all these digital and virtual objects and be able to create stuff really easily. And then in 2017, we released the world's first digital VR anatomical system. And if you've, again, watched the news, you would have seen this in 2017 being deployed in our NUHS system. At the same time, while we were building this capability, we were also building the capability to be able to do simulations in VR, and not just any form of simulations, but simulations that can be auto-marked or auto-corrected. So instead of having people to tell us what they know, like in very typical exam situations, now they didn't have to tell us what they knew. They just had to perform the procedure or perform the task, and without telling us, we could know whether or not they knew or what they didn't know what they needed to know based on different types of behavior that we will analyze using different means, right? And of course, we won quite a lot of recognition for this project. We won regional awards for this. Yeah. So, and of course, earlier this year, if you've seen this clip, actually, let me play you this clip so that it gives you a context of what we're going to talk about. Okay. Okay.
A call for Singapore's aviation sector.
Hey, can you all hear this? Did you all hear the video? The first part of the video? Yeah, you can hear it. Yeah, okay. And it's, by the way, very related to some industries that you are talking about. Okay, so it is related, which is great. Okay.
Not to lose focus and to continue accelerating digitalization and sustainability efforts. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat says the global industry will be reshaped significantly post-COVID, even as it shows signs of recovering from the pandemic. His comments came at the official launch of the SIA NUS Digital Aviation Corporate Laboratory, which will develop new tech solutions to improve SIA crew operations and services.
I hope that more companies here will consider strengthening your collaborations with our universities and research institutes. This can take the form of corporate labs like the one today, or more targeted research collaborations to tackle specific challenges or industry research consortia. At the heart of such partnerships is the tightening of the nexus between research and industry, enabling both sides to learn and benefit from each other.
The lab will also advance aviation by tapping into the research and development expertise from Singapore-based firms. The $45 million research facility will leverage artificial intelligence, data science, and sleep science. It will first focus on key areas like reshaping crew training, improving crew wellness, and transforming customers' onboard experience. Leisha Rodney with this report.
It may not look like it, but this cabin is not the real thing. It's a simulator for researchers to study passengers' cabin experience. From the seats to lighting and even temperature, Singapore Airlines aims to use the information collected to develop new products and services that can anticipate their customers' needs and improve their sleep and comfort during flights.
Singapore Airlines is best known for the service, especially the in-flight services, right? So how can we continue to be the leading? And currently, it's really based on the experience of our cabin crew and the rigorous training they have gone through this. Can we leverage on data? Can we leverage on technology?
At the other end of the lab, a cockpit simulator that uses augmented reality and virtual reality.
Instead of heading to a training facility, Singapore Airlines hopes to be able to have their pilots train from anywhere using a mobile platform like this augmented reality headset, where they'd be able to engage in an instructor-led training to develop their soft skills like communicating with the air traffic control or cabin crew.
What we're going to foresee is in the future, all these long-haul flights will be much more comfortable. Everyone will want to take on some of these flights because they will be well served. Likewise, the pilots and the crew are also well trained and well taken care of in their own wellness and therefore delivering even better services.
Over 70 researchers and PhD students will be trained at the Digital Aviation Lab over the next 5 years. They're expected to play a critical role in research and development for the aviation industry.
Hey, so let's stop this for a while. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because a lot of what we do, while I come from the School of Computing, design is not specifically about technology. It's not. It's about problem solving. So in fact, many times when we go through a lot of the projects that we do, very rarely might you think about the human side of things. And that's something that I have to always tell students and always teach students, that the human being is probably the most important part of the equation, and therefore understanding the human being is more important than understanding the technology or understanding the system or understanding anything else. It's about the users. All right. So one thing that you know about our national carrier is that they're really great at user experience. Okay, and I'm learning a lot from the projects that I do with them, but at the same time, I bring in a lot of stuff that they might not have considered, and it's something that you will learn when you take any of the courses that I do teach. All right, so so that's our Deputy Prime Minister, and I'm using virtual reality to teach him how to fly a plane. So that was quite an interesting thing, and it was very stressful, by the way, to be able to do that, but pulled it off. So yeah, great. So if you want to be able to understand how to design stuff that people have never used before, never learned it before, never experienced it before, and yet need to be able to pick it up and just use it, like very much in the museum or anywhere else, well, having really great user experience design background will allow you to do that. Okay. So because of that, now I'm showing you the courses that I teach in the NUS, right? You realize it's very design centric. And very a lot to do with how the brain works when it looks at stuff, when it hears stuff, when it experiences stuff, right? And then of course at the same time, then we package that into actual solutions which will help people, or hopefully will help people. And there's a way to measure all that. So that's really what my brand of user experience design is about. It's not about some fluffy concept that is beautiful to look at. No, the kind of design that we talk about in my courses are about functionality. And of course, the best style of design, in my view, is the design that is invisible, or what we call invisible design, whereby you don't even know it's working, you don't even know it's there, but it just works. And it just suits how you live your life. And that's the best form of design that's the form of design that I think is useful. All right. So in terms of the CET courses that I teach, UX design, and of course, metaverse, type of development work and so on and so forth. All right. And in a nutshell, that's me. Okay, so now that you know that this is the background that I come from, hopefully that helps you understand what I'm about to tell you and why I'm about to tell you these things. Okay. So improving your business with user experience design. I'm going to start off by asking you this. What is an experience? So what do you think an experience is? What do you think an experience is? You can either unmute your mic and talk about it, or you can type it into the chat and I'll read it out because you can't read it, unfortunately. So what do you think is design? What is an experience? What are you designing if you talk about user experience? What is an experience? And there are no right or wrong answers. I just want to know where your starting point is. Okay, human interactions. That's interesting. Maybe. Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. You see the problem with many things that people try and do, right? You realize that, yep, sorry. Anyone would like to speak? Anyone? No? Okay. Okay. Mo Chuan Chan, I think your mic is unmuted. You might want to mute it just so that it's easier for everybody. Yeah, okay, let's do that. Okay, so here's the thing. You realize that when you're called upon to describe what an experience is, it's actually quite difficult, right? To articulate it, to define it in what it actually is. So the problem here is that if you don't know what an experience actually is, then when we talk about user experience design, you don't actually know what you're designing for. So just something to help you along, okay? What is a good experience? Just think about what a good experience is. So if you could, you know, if you're on your laptops, right, or on your phones, if you could go into your browser and go to www.menti.com, right, and type in this code, and just tell me what words will you associate with a good experience? What words will you associate with a good experience? Right, so go to www.menti.com, all right, type in this code into the website, yeah, and then, you know, just go nuts. What we associate with, what words we associate with a good experience. And you can type in as many times as you want, by the way. It's not like it's a moth thing, no. Just type in whatever that comes to mind. Okay? Okay. Okay, great. The responses are coming in. All right. Yeah, keep going. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flash the responses so that you know that, you know, there's actual, you know, you're actually affecting and you're actually participating, right? Yeah. So as you can see from many of these, all right, keep going. All right, whatever you can think of, just put it in because it's going to be useful for the discussion. Okay. You would realize something very special about many of these words. Okay, you realize something very special about many of these words. Okay. Okay, good job, everyone. All right, good job. All right, good job. So you're all thinking about it already. Okay, so this is what more or less you think of as a good experience. Okay, this is more or less what you think of as a good experience. Okay, so my guess is that you probably know what's going to come next. All right, so did we just talk about a good experience? Now what's going to happen is I want you to refresh your page, all right? Go to www.menti.com again, but this time type in a different code, all right? And now I'm asking you to type in the words that describe a bad experience. Okay, so take note, the code is different now, right? The code that you type is this. So when you go to www.menti.com this time, okay, it should be empty again, and then now you're typing in this new set of codes. Okay. All right, good. So some of you have already found it. Good job. All right. Again, let me just drag it up here. All right, so that you know what the participation is going to be about. All right. Okay. Okay. Right. So for the good ones and the bad ones, you can just keep going. All right, whichever you want to do, just keep going. Okay. Because what we're going to do next is that I'm actually going to be doing a comparison between good versus bad, and then you will start to realize something about experience that you may not have known. All right. Now, okay. So look, good experience on the left, the bad experience on the right. So now let's talk about this for a while, right? Now, when you look at these words, on the left, the good experience, and on the right, the bad experience, okay? What is similar about these words? On the left, the good experience, and the bad, and on the right, the bad experience. What is similar about these words? Not different. We know what's different about it, but what's similar? Anyone? You can unmute your mic if you want to talk about it. You could type it into the chat and I'll read it out. Okay. All right. Someone here says emotions. All right. So similarly, on both sides, there are emotions. All right. Yeah, that there are perceptions that talk about this. Right, on both sides, you perceive certain things, and therefore, whether good or bad, right? What else? What else? What else? Impressions, all right? Yeah. Impressions about things which are very similar to perceptions, actually, right? So impressions and perceptions, similar stuff. Yeah. And so someone is shouting out now, experience, but the truth is we're trying to define experience. So you cannot say that experience is experience, right? But good try. All right, feelings. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, flow. Okay, that's interesting, right? So what is interesting about these words is this. Okay, what's interesting about these words is this. Now, all of you have identified something that is common. First of all, whether it's good or bad, we're talking about perceptions, right? We're talking about things like, for example, something that's confusing is a perception, right? Something that is efficient is a perception, right? Something that's amazing is a perception. At the same time, we talk about emotions, right? Things that are, if you're angry, if you're frustrated, right, or you're happy, or you're satisfied, it's pleasurable. These are and of course speed, right? These are form of emotion. But this is something quite interesting that I find whenever I talk to any group, you always you seem to miss out. And this is the idea of sensations. Do you realize that a good experience or a bad experience can also be defined as the type of sensation that you're having? And actually, some of you actually did talk about that in the two panels, whether it's good or bad, right? When something is sour, right, that's a sensation, right? Or something is smooth, that's a sensation. So interestingly, sensations are also part of the experience, which we rarely think about, but they are in fact very important in designing experiences. Okay, so good try, everybody. Okay, good job, right? So when we talk about experience, we are actually talking about three things. The first thing is sensations, because literally sensations are what you experience, the input that you have from the outside world. Without sensations, we have no input from the outside world at all, right? We don't know what's actually happening. So sensations are actually really important. But then once you have sensations and you process it, you start having emotions, right? And when you have emotions and sensations for a long period of time, you generate meaning, and then they become perceptions. So if you think carefully about it, all experiences can be decomposed down into sensations, emotions, and perceptions. Okay? Agree, disagree? Anyone? Anyone? Agree or disagree about any of this so far? Yeah, okay. Okay, I get I get a thumbs up. I don't know what a thumbs up means, by the way. I don't know whether or not thumbs up. I've got something to say or thumbs up. This is great. I don't know. But, if you want to talk about it, all right, let's talk about it, okay? Because it's probably going to be important in the business that you're in, all right? So, but let me just move on while you're churning out really hard questions to grill me on, okay? Yeah. If experience is about sensations, emotions, and perceptions, therefore, by right, when we talk about our goals for it, which is the sentiment, which is good or bad, right? Sentiment, the ultimate outcome of that, okay? Then what you're actually doing is you're designing such that certain experiences are evoked and that they produce a specific outcome that you would like to have. And literally, that's what we are designing. Okay? Literally, that's what we're designing. We're designing to evoke specific sensations, emotions, or perceptions to get a certain outcome. All right? So if you walk away from this webinar not remembering anything at all, just remember that experience is about sensations, emotions, and perceptions. And therefore, when you're doing experience design, this is actually what you're designing for. Okay? Now that we know what we're designing for, okay, then we can start talking about which one to look at first and which one to look at next. So for example, if I ask you sensations, emotions, perceptions, which one is the easiest to design for? Let's go. What do you think? Which one is the easiest to design for? Is it the sensations? Is it to evoke sensations, emotions, or perceptions? Let's go. Type into the chat. Unmute yourself if you want to. What do you think? Which is the easiest to design for? Okay, Fitri says perceptions. Okay, Wingting says perceptions are easiest. All right, Ken says emotions. Okay, maybe, yeah. Julie actually says sensations, which is quite interesting. Emotions. Okay, so we could go on, right? But now what's happening is that what's interesting is that each of you have a different understanding of what these things actually are. All right, so it's actually quite important to be able to explicate these concepts so that when you're doing the design, you know exactly what you're hitting. All right, because the next question that we're going to be asking is, well, what is the most impactful to design for? Just because it's easy doesn't mean it's impactful, doesn't mean it's useful, doesn't mean it hits your design goals, right? So we can go on again. Now, which is the most impactful? And if I ask you these questions again, suddenly you'll be racking your brain. So which one's the easiest? Okay, but again, which one is the most impactful? Because finally, even if it's the most impactful, you might not be able to answer the next question, whether or not it is the most appropriate to design for. So you realize that these are all very different questions that have to be answered even before you embark on any form of design exploration, right? The difficulty level, which means your skill level, the amount of payoff that you get, which is the impact, and then, of course, the rules and regulations that allow you to do certain things and disallow you to do certain things, which is appropriateness, right? Okay. So unfortunately, we won't be able to answer these questions in this really short webinar, but these are things that we tackle in any of the courses that we teach, okay? So when you talk about design, all right, what are you actually talking about? Because the thing is that I get a lot of students, both undergraduate and continuing education students, and they have this idea that design is this wishy-washy concept. It's all about beauty and aesthetics. It's all silly stuff. But I'm here to tell you that that's not the type of design that we practice in the courses that I teach. Okay? In the courses that I teach, we use this definition of design. It is achieving goals within constraints. This definition is coined by Alan Dix in 2004 in a really famous textbook, and we're using that because I find throughout my 20 years of design of design experience that this is a really great operationally ready definition, because it forces you already to know to seek out two very important things. What are the two very important things that you should seek out even before you start any design? Can anybody tell me? Anyone? This is just so I know that you're paying attention. I don't know whether or not you're paying attention. Your screen could be on and I have no idea, right? Come on, type it out or shout it out. Come on, anyone, let's go. What are the two main things that we always have to find out? Right, objectives, okay, very good. All right, objectives. So objectives are actually goals, right? What are your main goals? What are your main objectives? All right. And of course, I guess you know the answer. The other thing is figuring out what the constraints are. And to us, that's what design is, achieving goals within constraints. Therefore, when you have goals, but you have no constraints, that's not considered design. I have a term for that. It's called blue skying, right? You're just ideating. There are no constraints. Go nuts, go crazy, paste stuff on the board, go nuts. But that's just ideating, and that's not designing because you have no constraints. And of course, you have a lot of constraints and no goals. What's that called? A lot of constraints, and that's called school. I'm kidding. All right, it's not. You have a lot of constraints, no goals. That's not design either. Okay, it's just, yeah, it's not design. So design is really about achieving goals within constraints. Great. So now that you know that design is about achieving goals with constraints, then it becomes a bit easier to understand what's going on, right? When we talk about design, many things that we can talk about, but specifically, we just talk about the constraints first, because that's something that is very real to us, that we always have to contend with in our daily lives, right? In this course, or rather in the courses that I teach, I always talk about 4 constraints. I talk about political constraints, all right? Political constraints are basically, as we said before, rules, whether they are basically top-down rules, right? All top-down rules are considered political constraints. So, they could be rules that are laws, for example, right, enacted by the government, rules, for example, or policies that your company has, or even if you're still staying with your parents, house rules, right? Because they are the authority. They make the rules, you follow the rules, otherwise you get kicked out. Those are all considered political constraints. And then we have economic constraints. So economic constraints are not just about money, right? What other things could be economic constraints? Anyone? Type it out in chat. Come on, let's go. What could be considered economic constraint besides money? Besides money. Anyone? Besides money, what else can be an economic constraint? Anybody? Time, okay, well done. All right. And outlook, which means trends, right? Okay, keep going, keep going. All right. Stability, not, well, maybe, okay, if it was in short supply, and then it becomes a resource that could be talked about in that way, yeah, then maybe. But demand, okay, that's another one. That's another one, because again, right, it has to do with a resource. So therefore, anything that has to do with resources can be considered economic constraints. Let me blow your mind with one. I can also tell you that trust and patience and tolerance is also a form of economic constraint, because it is in short supply. It is a resource that can be exhausted. So typically people don't think about resources in that way, but it is. And in user experience design, it becomes really important to think about it. All right. We talk about social constraints. So, all your cultures, just because something is legal doesn't mean it's socially acceptable. One example would be, I don't know, cooking fish in using the pantry in your office. All right, the microwave oven in your pantry in office, cooking fish. That's probably not great for a lot of people. If you haven't tried it, go ahead and try it and see how hated you're going to be. And for you to have tried it, well, or you've experienced it, you know how hateful that can be, right? So it's legal, but it might not be acceptable socially. So again, these are constraints, right? And then of course, lastly, technological constraints, which I guess we all know about, but sometimes we need to explicate why that's the case, okay? And then when we think about these constraints in design, we therefore always think of goals as well. And there could be many goals that your company would like to achieve, all right? But all of them are still subject to political, economic, social, and technological constraints, okay? So with that in mind, then now think about it from the context of the experience that you want your users to have, right? If your goals are, for example, governance, sustainability, satisfaction, optimization, then what are the experiences that are allowed within that sphere of thought? All right. And similarly, in the same way, when we think about it, since we're talking about the two sides of the same coin, what are the constraints that prevent you from achieving the experiences that you want, number one, or that in fact constraints are good because they provide you with boundaries of knowing what is and what isn't. And therefore using constraints as a way of scoping your projects, of scoping your outcomes is also something that can be done quite well if you have the skills to do it. All right? So a lot of people think that, constraints are actually a bad thing, but they're not. Constraints can be a good thing as well because they provide you with boundaries and scope. But at the same time, sometimes they stop you from doing certain things that you want to do with your experience to achieve certain goals. And therefore, it's a balancing act between how do you do this well, when you should continue to do this, when you should stop doing this, and so on and so forth. Okay? All right. Now, in summary, in a way, what we're talking about when we talk about experience design is that, okay, so you have your experiences, right? But you should be now thinking, if you've been actively engaged during this entire discussion, then something should jump out at you that is wrong about what I've been saying for the past 35 minutes. All right. What you should realize is that we can't actually design experiences directly. You know what I mean? We can't actually design experiences directly, right? We can't actually tell people how to think. We can't specifically control the way people think. Therefore, it is actually impossible for you to control a person's emotions, perceptions, or sensations. Okay? However, what you can do is you can design the environment to evoke the required sensations, emotions, and perceptions. And that's actually what you're designing for. So when we talk about user experience design, we're not actually talking about designing experiences because that's impossible. What we are doing is designing the environment with the hope that specific experiences will be evoked. And of course, we can talk about how that happens with some certainty. We can talk about, how we can ensure that certain things do happen, even though it doesn't always happen in the entire population. But there are ways of making these things happen. And these are, specific techniques that you will learn when you do user experience design. All right. So there's a specific framework that we use, and we use this thing called usability engineering to do a lot of design work that I do. For the past 20 years, I've been using this design framework. It's just that it's changed throughout the years. What design thinking, now it goes by several other names, right? Design thinking, user-centered design, they all have similar concepts that usability engineering has. And in a way, it just depends how you practice it. All right, so we'll be using a lot of usability engineering to do your design, and it's a very nice structured way of making sure that you cover all bases when you're doing design. So for example, the first part, really understanding your users really well to the point where you even know what they like, what they don't like, what motivations they have, what frustrations they have, and so that you know why you're designing it. And the second thing about, for example, claims about current practice, right? Whereby, how do they currently use the environment around them to achieve their aims, even though it might not be optimal, it might not be great, but it still does the job to a certain degree. Well, guess what? That's where your business opportunities are, right? And then after that, we go down to then talk about actual design, and we use specific design concepts like the usability goals to figure out How do you evaluate designs even after you've done them? And then you use these things called design principles to solve the problems that you found from your evaluations of usability goals. And then it's an iterative process. Remember I talked about iteration? Well, you iterate, right? And then you get better and better and better. And of course, there's the time where you have to stop doing this. And we talk about when you should stop and why that's a useful place to stop so that you can move on to the next place, which is actually prototyping and evaluating. Okay? So the Nelson Norman Group has a really great definition of user experience, right? Remember here that they're not talking about experience per se, they're talking about user experience. And here what they're saying is that user experience is the end user's interaction. So by the way, you know, someone just now said it has to do with user interaction. You're actually right? It has to do with the end user's interaction. So in fact, everything you're designing for, the emotions, sensations, perceptions, and the environment that you're designing for, all right, is actuated through end user interaction. Therefore, you're designing interactions. And now that you know that this is the sphere or this is the scope in which you can design stuff, then it becomes clear about how you go about the design when you're using usability engineering to do it. Okay? So the 5 steps to improving your business using UX design would be, first of all, determine your business goals. Really important. It's not just some wishy-washy mission statement type stuff. No, it's so specific that you know whether you failed or you passed. All right? Translate your goals into actual experience and then figure out the constraints that stop you or allow you to do certain things the way you want to do them. Seek to understand your users so well that you know them so well that they become your friends and you live their lives and you really know what they need and what they don't need, what they like, they don't like, and why. All right? And then finally, use usability engineering to improve your user's environment to achieve your business goals. So in a nutshell, that's it. This is a really, really simple 5-step process. And by the way, congratulations, now you're an expert in UX design. So yeah, you're an expert in UX design. Oh no, so I've just put myself out of the job. Oh well. If you're really that good, well done, okay? But if you don't think that you understand many of these concepts, then guess what? Take the course and you'll really become an expert in UX design. Yeah. That's all I have to say, actually. Thank you.